Hello.
Hello, what?
Well, I've sent this to James and Tony, but this microphone is actually working.
How do you know?
Because I can see I'm here.
Oh. Greetings from the projection booth at the Winstanley Lecture Theatre in Trinity College, Cambridge. The temperature in here is currently about 37 degrees, and we're in the midst of Storm Boris. Doris. Oh, sorry, I was thinking about Brexit. That's Storm Boris. And we have a talk here about collages. And there's a collage here of 3 images. One looking like an image of some people. Oh, we're no longer, what are we looking for? We're looking for 4 ticks and 3 crosses. We're not looking for irrelevant extracurricular activities. Why not? We're not looking for particular school types. Yes, we are. Good schools. Particular backgrounds. So I think we should be, let's see, academic ability and potential. Yes. Suitability for the chosen course. Yes. Subject requirements. Yes. Genuine interest. Motivation to. So is this is streaming, is it?
So this is live streaming now on a test.
Don't disappear down the stairs.
On a test thing.
So I would like to think I could pick this up myself, but
I'll just ping you the link. You get a load of feedback.
Because of this microphone. How long is the lead?
Quite long.
I'll just leave it outside and pick her up.
Yeah.
That's the main piece of advice I always give, is to make sure you've double checked the requirements for the course that you're applying for and make sure that your qualifications fit that. The next 2 things are kind of the same one kind of together. So suitability for the chosen course and genuine subject interest. We're not interested in someone who's doing a course because it's what their teachers think they should do or it's what their parents want them to do. Quite often we get applicants for courses, it's often with a course like medicine, where people aren't really sure that they want to do it, but they're being pushed into it by other people around them. And that can be really obvious at an interview. You will be able to spot the people who really love the subject they've applied for. So that's the main thing I would kind of emphasize as well. Make sure you're choosing a course that you really want to study. And then think about how everything else will work from there. Choosing the course that you apply for is the most important part of applying to any university, because that's the reason that you go. The suitability for the course also kind of fits in there. That might be more relevant, especially if you're looking at any of the vocational courses, so something like medicine or veterinary medicine, whether you've got any work experience, kind of helping out in a hospital or in an old people's home. We don't really look for work experience for any other kind of courses because we know that not everyone will be able to get it. Some people get some for law, they may be shadow lawyers that they know. Some people get them for things like engineering. They'll maybe do some kind of practical experience working in a company, but they aren't really seen as particularly necessary overall. It's just for those courses, a bit like medicine, that we think it's more compulsory because that's obviously very vocational. You do a medicine degree so that you become a doctor at the end, whereas most other degrees is a bit more flexible. Does anyone have any questions on that so far? Yes. This is the thing that we don't care about. We don't care what kind of school you go to. We don't think that's important. We don't care if you come from a particular background. Again, we're looking just for the kind of academic ability and aptitude for your subjects. And we don't care about irrelevant extracurricular activities. So people often say things like, oh, should I put that I'm, grade 8 piano on my personal statement if I'm applying for history? And we sort of think, well, it's good for you that you can do that. You know, that's great in terms of your development, but it doesn't tell us anything about how good you're going to be at being a history student. Obviously, if you're applying for music, it's a different question. So we want you to tell us about how you work to kind of explore the subject you do outside the classroom. So maybe you really enjoy your higher level maths class. Well, what else have you been doing? You know, have you been doing any international maths competitions? Have you been watching any lectures online? Have you read any books or anything that you find interesting there? So that's what we mean when we say irrelevant versus relevant extracurriculars. So a relevant one would be like relevant to your subject. So if you're interested in politics, maybe you're in like a youth politics group, maybe you're in a parliamentary kind of political party, or maybe you like work for your local representative, anything like that. We can kind of connect it to your subject. But if you're just telling us, oh yeah, I'm on my football team, we obviously learn a bit about you from that. You know, we learn that you're a team player and that you've got time management skills. But that's all we really know. It doesn't tell us anything about your subject ability. So anything you talk about anywhere in your application, you should be able to relate to the course and why that means that you're going to be a good candidate for that course. Everyone understand that so far? Good. Okay, so this is the application process. So we start at the top left and it goes around that big circle. So the first thing you have to do is choose a course. I've already talked about that. You want it to be something that you really like, that you're really keen to study, and to make sure that you fit all of that course requirements that they may have. And the next process is you have to choose a college. You can also submit what's called an open application, where you don't pick a college and then you're randomly assigned one by a computer. But the vast majority of our applicants do pick one. I think about 95% choose a college. And that's what I would recommend. Like, why would you ever want to have a computer kind of randomly pick it? So just pick one. Not every single college offers every single subject. Most of them offer most of the subjects. So if you have any questions about that kind of specifically, all of that information is really easily found online. So it should be quite straightforward. The UCAS application deadline is the 15th of October. So you have to have your application in by then, which is earlier than most other UK universities. So that's a really key thing that a lot of people don't realise, and we don't consider late applications. Your UCAS form, on that you'll have all your other university choices as well. You can only apply to either Oxford or Cambridge, you've got to pick one, but then you can apply to 4 other courses at any other combination of universities. So we say in Cambridge that you have to pick one course. We don't want people who are applying for more than one course, but other universities, you can apply for multiple courses at the same uni. So if you're applying to a university like UCL, I think you guys have been there as well, you could apply for something like history and French at the same university. Does that make sense? Whereas at Cambridge, we say you have to pick specifically one course. So you apply by the 15th of October, and then you have to submit a second form called the SAQ by the 22nd of October. The earlier you apply in terms of the UCAS deadline, the more time you'll have to do the SAQ. It won't affect how likely you are to get in. We don't run first come, first served or anything like that. But the more time that you allow yourself after the application to kind of get organised, the less stressful I think it would be. And so my advice to candidates is, like, if you can, try and get your application in like maybe a week before the deadline, just so that if there's anything you've missed or anything that needs correcting, and your school can help you with this, you can get it sorted before the deadline. Just that, I think that makes sense to most people. But you've got to be really on top of it as well, because you want to make sure that it's all organised in time for the October deadline. Then at this point, you'll sit some, yes?
Sorry, what is the SAQ?
It's called the Supplementary Application Questionnaire, and it's just an extra form that asks for some more kind of specific information about you. So it'll be things like how many people are in your classes for the subjects that you're taking, and what specific content you've covered, because we know that like lots of different exam boards do different stuff, and lots of different schools will cover different information as well. So for example, IB history, you've got lots of different options within that, what to study, and we want to know what it is you've specifically done, so that we can ask you about it at interview, or that we can find something that you haven't done in school to ask you about as well. So it's basically just to get more information on that kind of stuff. It's a very kind of straightforward form. It's much less information than the UCAS form. So we do tell people not to worry about it. There's a very detailed guide to filling it in available online. The other thing that people sometimes use it for is if you're applying for a course like natural sciences. I don't know how much anyone knows about that. In Cambridge, that's how we organise all our science applications, except medicine, maths, computer science, and engineering. But if you're interested in like physics, chemistry, biology, or any of the kind of sub-specialisms within that, like zoology or astrophysics, you apply via the natural sciences course, which is quite unusual. Most other universities in the UK will make you apply for like biology, chemistry, physics separately. So we have a section on the SAQ where you can say, I specifically want to do this course at Cambridge because whatever. So that's another option that you have there as well. But yeah, it's quite a straightforward form. Someone else have a question up here?
I have the same question.
Oh, same question. Okay, good. So the next part of the application is the admissions test part. So different subjects will have different requirements here. So for example, if you're interested in medicine, you have to sit the BMAT, which is the British Medical Application Test or something. And other courses will have different assessments. You might also have to submit some written work, so some essays that you've done. If you're interested in an art subject, these can just be ones that you've done in school. But that all kind of happens during November. So you've got to stay quite on top of things. You've got to keep checking your emails because that's how we communicate with all our applicants. And then the interviews always happen in December. Same couple of weeks every year. It's always the first 1 or 2 weeks of December, and that's when we interview all our candidates. At Cambridge, we interview about 75 to 80% of applications. Oxford interview about 50%, so there's quite a big difference there. And I'm going to talk a bit about interviews in a minute, but that's the time of year that always happens. Yeah.
What the engineering? Is there a specific admission test?
Yes, engineering has an admissions test. It's just called the engineering assessment, the engineering application assessment. And you sit that in your school. Your school will be a registered test centre. So it'll be like a combination. There'll be a multiple choice section and then a section with like longer maths and physics questions. But you sit that in your school, or if your school isn't a test centre, then a nearby test centre. But there tend to be quite a few, especially if your school does lots of overseas applications for universities. So anywhere that you sit things like SATs or like international tests, that's where you sit the test. And again, there's all this information about subject-specific requirements is all online, so definitely check it out. The decisions, everybody hears in January, so after Christmas, that's when you hear. You'll either have been offered a place, which might be conditional on your exam results. So it might be saying, okay, yeah, you've got a place at Cambridge, you've got to get 42 points and 776. That's a fairly standard offer here at Trinity. You might be rejected, which is unfortunate. Obviously, it's a very competitive university. Not everyone gets an offer. Or you might be pooled to a different college and they might give you an offer. So because we know that the college system isn't always exactly perfect, what we don't want is for you to end up applying to a college that happens to be very oversubscribed for that particular subject in that year. And that means that you don't get a place even though you deserve to. So what the pooling system does is kind of redistributes the really good applications to colleges that might be slightly less oversubscribed in that year to make sure that everyone has an equal chance of getting a place if they're good enough. Does that make sense? So about 20% of Cambridge students are at a college that they didn't originally pick. But because of the way the college system works, because you're in quite a small community, people tend to become like very attached to their colleges very quickly. So I have lots of friends here at Trinity who applied to different colleges. One of them applied to Jesus, one of them applied to Emmanuel, but now they really love Trinity because this is where they live. So it is quite an efficient system at kind of making sure that you're not disadvantaged if you happen to pick a college that's particularly popular for one subject. Does everyone understand so far? Yeah.
You said that when we feel like filling the exact form,
yeah.
You say that about the information that we haven't about the courses and the information we did in school.
Yeah.
In order to ask us about information that we didn't do in the interview.
Yeah, so I'm going
How
to talk
should
about
we-
interviews in a minute.
How should we be prepared about?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. Don't worry. Interviews is next. So this is all the information that we use to assess applications. So we'll look at your academic record, so your grades from school, your personal statement, that's on your UCAS form. So it's about a page long of an essay where you kind of talk about why you want to do the subject. Your teacher's reference, which is also really important. So everyone who applies to university, their teacher also has to write a reference about whether they think they'd be a good candidate. Performance in any admissions test that we ask you to do. Written work, you have to do it. Contextual data, and that's more used for UK students. But it's just like, for example, if you've come from a school that doesn't do particularly well academically, but you've done better than most people at your school, that would be a kind of an example of contextual data. And then an interview. People often ask, like, what's the most important bit? You know, what should I focus on? But no part of the application is considered in isolation. We look at everything, every single piece of information, and we look at everything we have before we start making decisions. So they're all important, basically. So the personal, yeah.
Do different colleges have different entry requirements?
Yes, and that is another thing that you want to check. Some will have more specific requirements about subjects. So, for example, at Trinity, we ask, let me think of an example. We ask our applicants for maths to be taking maths and physics at IB higher level, because there isn't a further maths equivalent in the IB. Whereas if you do A levels, there's maths and further maths. So you can do two options that are just maths. So that's what we ask for. I think not every college asks for physics higher level if you're applying for maths. So there'll be some like that where it's kind of more specific. Some colleges for different subjects will or will not ask you to do a test. So as well as the admissions assessment, that's common to everyone, which you sit in November. Some colleges might also ask you to do a kind of mini test at interview. That's very relaxed. Often it's used in the interview itself. So maybe if your interview is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you have to go and sit a kind of short exam where you answer some questions and then you bring your answer sheet to the interview and then the interviewer talks about what you've done. So it's just a way to kind of almost have more time thinking about the kind of questions. But yeah, that is a good question. Lots of different colleges will have slightly different requirements. So again, it goes back to the kind of research stuff that I was talking about at the start. You want to make sure that you fit the requirements for the course everywhere, and then also the specific course requirements that a college would have. And that's another way that you can kind of pick a college. And some people definitely don't want to do a test, an extra test. So they choose colleges that don't have one. Whereas others think, oh, okay, that'll give me another chance to kind of show what I can do, and maybe I'm less confident in an interview, so I want to kind of give them more information about me that's kind of not person to person, if that makes sense. If that's what you're kind of more comfortable with, you can do that too. So yeah, they are all different. So this is the personal statement. This goes on your UCAS form. So as I said, it's about a page long. It's where you tell the universities why you want to do the course. The important thing is that your personal statement goes to every different university that you apply for via UCAS. So you've got to make sure that it's relevant to all of the universities. And because most UK universities don't interview, for them, the personal statement is more important than it is for us, because it's the only kind of personal information they get about you. Whereas because we interview most of our candidates, we can also like talk to them in person and see what they're like. So it is quite an important part for other universities. But we will also use the information that you give us for interview. So this is one of the kind of common things that it's really important to talk about. So if you're interested in doing a history degree, for example, we don't expect that you are interested in like every single bit of history. Nobody is. We don't think that you're going to be interested in, you know, everything from the ancient Egyptians until, you know, like 2016, like all over the world. But what we want to know is the specific bits of history that you're interested in. So it might be, you know, kind of 20th century European history, or it could be sort of theme-based, like the history of gender, or the history of war, or the history, like economic history. So the personal statement is a really good place to kind of indicate that. Again, if you want to do physics through natural sciences, you know, are you interested in kind of like special relativity or quantum mechanics or, you know, cosmology? Like, we want to know your kind of specific interests within the subject, because that's the kind of thing we want to talk to you about at interview. We want to give you the opportunity to kind of show us your best side, show us where you've got the most kind of information to kind of work on. Does that make sense? So the personal statement is the space that you can say, the reason that I really want to do this subject at university is because, and then tell us. So it's a really important part of the application, just because it's how we find out more about you. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so the stuff that you should put in it is this. So why you want to do the subject, that's very important. The areas of the subject that you like, and what have you done to explore them. You know, it's not enough just to say, oh, I was in class and this is what I do well in, because everybody does that. We want to know, like, what are you doing outside the classroom? Are you doing extra reading? Are you going to events at your local university? What is it that you're doing to kind of push yourself? Academic extracurriculars, so again, that's the kind of stuff I was just saying. Further reading, if you've done any summer schools, or if you've done any kind of trips to like museums or factories or anything that you can make relevant to your subject, we want to know. And then finally, the other extracurriculars. And this can just be like quite a small section of the personal statement. So this is other stuff that you do that isn't relevant to the subject. However, lots of universities that aren't Cambridge like to see that information. For us, as I said, we don't think it's important, but other universities do. So you should put it on your personal statement, because that goes to all the universities you applied for, but it can be quite a small section at the bottom. It doesn't need to be kind of the main thing. Does that make sense? Yeah, and then you can also have a section on future aspirations. Not everybody does this, it's kind of up to you. But if you're really sure that you want to be in, say, work in the financial sector and you're applying for a degree in economics, you know, you can talk about how that course is going to get you where you want to go. If you want to be a lawyer and you're applying for law, you can say, yeah, I want to do this law degree and then go off and be a lawyer. And as I said, it's not relevant for everyone. Plenty of people don't know what they want to do after they finish uni, so that's fine too. A lot of people won't really mention that section. In the interview, this is what people look for. So clear, flexible, and analytical thought. What on earth does that mean? Well, it basically means that you have the kind of ability to kind of change how you think based on new information, that you can deal with kind of problems quite kind of clearly and simply, and that you can kind of deal with having new information as well. So earlier you asked, one of you asked about how you prepare for being asked things that you've never come across before. Obviously the point is that you can't. So your interview might focus in part on some stuff that you've told us you're interested in. And then there's a good chance that you might get something unfamiliar. So if you're interested in applying for, say, engineering, you might be asked to look at some questions, maybe some math. For biology, you might be given like some samples, like some data that's been organized in a graph, and you might have to kind of explain what that means. For history, you might be given a source material. So like a book or like an extract, and asked to kind of talk about what it says. For English, you might be given a poem or some prose to read. So that's what I mean, is you'll be offered some stuff that you've not thought about, that you've not prepared for. And what we want to do is see how you respond to that. Does everyone make sense? So the point is that some of the stuff you're going to be asked about is giving you the chance to kind of show off what you think you're best at. And that's an important part. But another really important part is unfamiliarity. So can you think on your feet? Can you learn new things quickly and kind of be flexible in how you think about them? So that's part as well. Obviously, enthusiasm for your subject. As I've already talked about, some people don't apply for the course that they really, really want to do. And they end up being kind of bored, or, you know, maybe they don't enjoy it as much. And we know that Cambridge is difficult. It's a very demanding university. You've got to do loads of work when you're here. So if you're in a subject that you don't actually like, or if you're like asleep in a lecture, like this kid, then that's not going to be a lot of fun. And so we want to make sure people are applying for the right subject for them. The next thing I've already kind of touched on is assimilating new ideas. So that's applying the kind of existing concepts that you have to kind of challenging new questions. So you might be asked something and you kind of give a response that's good for that scenario, and then your interviewer might introduce a new situation. So he might say, okay, assuming we're in this scenario, what if I did this? And then see how you react to that piece of information. And then the final bit obviously is more appropriate for something like medicine, but it's basically professional commitment. You know, do you actually want to be a doctor? You know, or are you just interested in kind of science? Because obviously if you're just interested in how the human body works, you know, you could do biology, you could look at pathology or physiology, you know, you could look at the kind of pure science side of things. But if you want to use that information to practice medicine, then you need to apply for medicine. So it's that professional commitment that is only really relevant for a few subjects. So obviously if you're interested in English, we're not asking you to like professionally commit to English because it's not a vocational course. Does everyone understand that? Has anyone got questions on the interview process? Okay, we'll have time as well at the end. So these are the kind of questions that you might be asked. So some of them we've already kind of touched about, so there'll be discussion on the stuff you mentioned in your personal statement. There'll be some challenging questions related to A-level or your IB course. So it'll be stuff that you've talked about, that you've covered, that you might have written on your SAQ. You know, you said, oh, in physics, we covered like Newtonian mechanics. So you might be asked some stuff on that. So it's just to make sure that you're kind of, that you've understood everything that you've said you've done. A big tip for interviews and personal statements, don't lie. If you write on your personal statement, I've read this book, your interviewer is probably going to ask you about it. And then if you haven't read it, it's going to be pretty obvious. So you should never lie. Never say you're interested in something if you're not. There must be something that you're interested in. And if you can't think of anything, then you're probably applying for the wrong subject. So don't lie. You might be given, as I said, a text to discuss, or a specimen if you're a scientist, or a problem sheet to work through. So again, be kind of more sort of theory-based stuff. You could be given some kind of quirky questions. They often say that the Oxford and Cambridge interviews are supposed to be really weird, and that's not true. But what would happen is that it's very much a discussion. You know, it's not the interviewer firing random questions at you and you answering them. You know, you might be asked 4 or 5 questions on one topic, and it might kind of develop like a conversation. So they're not just going to be random things; they're all going to be kind of connected. And the interview itself might be in like 2 or 3 sections. So as an example, my politics interview, the first kind of section was on one of the things I talked about in my personal statement. I talked about conflict resolution and peace processes. And I'm from Northern Ireland, and we've had a conflict and we've resolved it. So I talked about that and then compared it to other places in the world. The middle section was on one of the essays that I submitted. It was on some kind of like sociological analysis of poetry. So it's like the understanding of the poetry that I read and how that relates to the kind of themes that we were talking about. And then the third section, I was given like some political kind of theory, and I had to like talk about the arguments in it. So it was kind of in 3 distinct sections. Does that make sense? And that would be a similar thing for a science interview. So you might have a section on something you've talked about in your A-levels. You might have a section on maybe a test that you've done at the university, and you might have a section where they give you something new and you have to kind of work with it. So that's basically how they work. The other thing to emphasize is they're supposed to be similar to the teaching style at Cambridge. That really small group teaching where you cover the kind of work that you've done, that's what an interview is designed to kind of replicate. And so basically, if you enjoy the interview, that's a good sign, because that's how we teach at Cambridge. Obviously, a lot of people find them very stressful and you're very nervous. But the interview is designed to kind of replicate the way that you learn here. So it's also a chance for the interviewer to say, well, would that person suit this style of learning? Because not everybody suits it. So it's again another insight into whether or not you would kind of thrive at Cambridge. So in terms of what you can do right now, these are the 4 things that we use to kind of help people in terms of their application. So the first thing is the course choice, and we talked about this loads. So make sure it's something you really want to do, make sure that you fit the requirements, and make sure there aren't any like issues in terms of, you know, subjects or anything like that. So that's the most important thing to do, and the thing that takes the most kind of research. You know, you've got to look at all the websites, maybe order some prospectuses, and really think about what it is that you want to study. The next thing is obviously results. You want to do as well as you can all the time. Your final exams obviously are at the end of the kind of process, but any kind of coursework that you do, anything that's like a kind of mock exam or a practice exam, try and do as well as possible in all of those, because your teachers can use them in your reference, and it'll also be easier for you to revise for the big ones at the end if you've already kind of got the information in your head. So do as well as you can at school. Engage and explore. So think about what you can do outside of the class to kind of get involved in your subject. And then finally, practice. So this is with relation to the specific admission stuff. So practice talking about why you want to do your subject out loud. That's a very easy way to kind of practice for an interview. But it's actually quite tricky. You know, someone said, okay, stand up and say, this is why I want to do engineering. Like that's a difficult thing to do. But that might be how you kind of start an interview. Obviously, I wouldn't make you stand up in front of a whole room, you know, and sort of easy question to begin an interview with might be, well, why do you want to do this subject? So you've got to make sure that you actually know and that you've got something to say there. Look at the kind of past admissions tests and the practice papers. Again, they're all available online, and there's specifications there so that you can see if they're going to be testing any existing knowledge. So most of the humanities subjects, admissions tests, don't use any existing knowledge because, as I've already said, for example, the history curriculum across different schools and stuff is very, very broad. But the science ones often will use specific knowledge, and they'll have a list online of this is everything you need to know. So you might need to know these amount of formula in maths, you know, this amount of kind of knowledge of physics, and this amount of knowledge of chemistry in order to do this paper. So those tests have exactly their requirements that you need to know. It's all available online, but that's something you obviously want to check. And if for any reason there's a bit that you're unfamiliar with, you want to make sure you've kind of brushed up on it so that you're ready to sit these tests. And then think about kind of time management, obviously generally in your life, but exam time management is one of the most important things. So making sure that you don't run out of time when you're finishing things. That'll serve you really well generally in life, but it's one of the reasons that people tend to do badly on our admissions tests is that they run out of time. It's not that they aren't good answering the questions, so make sure you're good at that. These are some frequently asked questions. Before I ask them, is there any other ones, apart from the ones on this board, that anyone wants to know at any point? Yeah?
Tell me about your personal statement. If you apply for different courses,
Yeah.
like for law and then history, and French,
Yeah.
how's your personal statement going to be written? I mean, you not focus on one subject.
Yeah, so then it's tricky. You've got to basically cover all of them in the same thing. With some subjects, so for example, something like history courses and history and French, it's not that difficult, and you can kind of talk about the areas where they overlap. So if you're interested in French history, for example, or the kind of culture and political aspects that kind of focus in there as well. There are some subject combinations where it's basically impossible. If you're interested in, I don't know, criminology and biology, that's two very different subjects. So one of the things that you want to do is try and make sure that your courses are all fairly similar, and that should be quite easy just because that's where your specific interests are. But the other thing to remember is that universities know that you have the option of applying to lots of different courses. So most of the time, if you're writing, say you've applied for 4 history courses and one that's history and French, they'll understand if the French bit is quite small. And if you've got good grades and you show that you're kind of passionate about history, you'll probably get an offer for that one as well. So it's sort of not too much to worry about, but it is a difficult thing to do. And obviously, if your subjects are really, really far apart, you might want to rethink why you want to do that combination. Any other questions? Okay, well, just to run through these quickly. Can I apply to both Oxford and Cambridge? No. Which subjects do I need? It depends on what you apply for. Some subjects, like human, social, and political sciences, which is the social science course that I took here at Cambridge, has no subject requirements, so you can start doing it if you've got, high level English, Greek, and philosophy, or maths, biology, and chemistry. Anyone can take that course. If you're interested in science courses, generally there's more specific requirements. But art subjects, normally they'll ask for you to do the one that the subject is at higher level. So as I said, history, you've got to do history higher level. Geography, you have to do geography higher level, that kind of thing. What's the most important part of an application? It's all important. Is there a minimum GCSE requirement? I don't think you guys did GCSEs, did you? So the answer is no, but it doesn't affect you anyway. Just to reiterate, because Cambridge has got such a strong international reputation, we get loads of applicants who haven't come through the UK school system. So we're very used to dealing with different kinds of qualifications. So you don't really need to worry about that at all. Which colleges are better for which subjects? Pretty much they're all the same. As I said, not every college will do every subject, so you want to check that. But because the teaching is organised by the university, it doesn't really matter which college you take the subject at. Are some colleges easier to get into than others? Not really. Some colleges have particular reputations in certain subjects. So for example, here at Trinity, we've got a very good reputation for maths. So we do tend to attract some very strong maths applicants, but that also means that we take more maths students than any other college. So we get the most number of maths applicants, but we have the most number of maths places as well. So it kind of balances itself out like that. And as I said, the pool system means that applicants are redistributed to other colleges if they're good enough to get in, but there isn't enough space. So Trinity gets lots of maths applicants. We take quite a few, but also we put lots in the pool, and other colleges give them spaces quite a lot. So it kind of works itself out. What extracurricular activities will help my chances of admission? Ones that are about your subject, and that's it. So I think that is everything that I wanted to cover today. Yeah, that's just some websites and some and the other thing to remember is that the requirements and stuff do change quite a lot year to year. So it won't always be the same information. So you want to kind of make sure you're checking the most up-to-date versions of everything so that you have that option. No one had any other questions they wanted to know? Oh, yeah.
So what's the most basic difference, or the most important difference between Oxford and Cambridge?
Good question. Sometimes it's the course. So if you are interested in like economics, at Cambridge you do that by itself, and at Oxford you do it by PPE, politics, philosophy, and economics. Their history course focuses on particular different issues. History at Cambridge focuses a lot on intellectual history, the history of ideas, as well as specific places. So the like modules within the courses are quite different. The cities are different. So Oxford, I think, feels like a city with a university kind of in it. And Cambridge feels like a city that's grown up around the university. So I think in Cambridge, the university like dominates more of the city, whereas Oxford, there's more city that doesn't have university stuff in it. Does that make sense? So Oxford is in some ways like a bigger city, but Cambridge, the university has more influence, I think. It's where you want to live, which bit you like. It rains less here. And what's the difference? The application process is slightly different. So there'll be slightly different kinds of tests. There are different, they interview far fewer people. So at Cambridge, you're more likely to get an interview, but having an interview means that you still have to get through quite a lot of the process. Whereas at Oxford, because they only interview half the candidates, you know, you've got like a higher chance of getting in from the interview. I didn't explain that very well. A higher proportion of people who get interviewed at Oxford get offers, but a higher proportion of Cambridge applicants get interviews. So if you really, really think that you need an interview to kind of show off, but that maybe your paper application isn't as strong, then Cambridge might be better because it gets you, you're more likely to get to the interview stage. Whereas Oxford, you've got to do pretty well to get to the interview stage, but then you've got like a reasonable chance of getting in. Does that kind of make sense? Yes. Okay, I don't know if I said that wrong, so yeah.
So, say for a specific year, many maths students apply and less like politics students apply. Do you still keep the same spots for the maths students as the previous years where they were more equal, or do you like adjust to the application?
So overall across the university, it stays pretty much the same. We have kind of, you know, we take say 300 first year lawyers across the university, but actually the colleges will kind of redistribute quite a lot. Sometimes that happens, but generally we don't have any fixed like quotas or anything for any subject except medicine, because the number of medical students in the UK is set by the like government, because that's how many doctors they want. But no, so we'll adjust a little bit. We always want to keep fairly similar numbers. So at Trinity, the subject ratio is about 55% science subjects to about 45% art subjects, and we want to keep that fairly consistent. But we might like move around between the different subjects. So normally there are about 6 or 7 politics students at Trinity and about 30 engineers. That's just how it happens. There are more art subjects, they tend to be smaller. But it moves around a little bit. But we'll tend to try and make sure that those students get places at other colleges rather than like filling us up with one subject. If that makes sense. But good question. Anyone else want to know anything? Yeah.
Regarding accommodation,
yeah,
the prices, how do we?
We'll go around and look at the different accommodation. Generally, the prices are, obviously it kind of depends on the exchange rate, but rent in Trinity, the cheapest rooms are about £18 a week, and the most expensive are like probably less than double that, about £140 a week. But you only have to pay for accommodation when you're physically in the room. So you won't have to pay over the holidays. You won't have to pay like at Easter or Christmas, which is different from quite a lot of universities. You also get guaranteed accommodation the whole time you're a student here. So you never have to like move out and live like in the private sector, like rent from a landlord. And it's often there that people get charged lots of money. So that's the same across Cambridge, that if you're an undergraduate student here, you definitely get accommodation. Yeah, but you and then you. Actually, you already asked. You first.
But does it seem like for Oxford regarding accommodation that all 4 years we've been staying?
I don't know. I didn't go to Oxford. I don't really work there. I don't work there. It's likely that it'll be quite similar, but Oxford property market is slightly more expensive than Cambridge, so that might impact on it some way. It's something that you can kind of check. And you're best to check with specific colleges because not every single college there has the same policy. Yeah. Yeah.
Why can someone apply for?
It's just a kind of historical thing that's always happened. I think part of it is because both Oxford and Cambridge expend a lot of energy, money, and time on the application process, much more than other universities. So you think of like the number of different stages, the number of different pieces of information that we ask for. So I think what we want is to make sure that we're not doing it kind of twice for no reason, if that makes sense. So obviously, most of the people who are made an offer for Cambridge, particularly people in the UK, will accept that offer. And the same with Oxford. Most of the people who they make offers to, like, will go there instead of somewhere else. And I think they'd be worried that if they had both of them, they wouldn't be able to kind of pitch their numbers as accurately, because obviously they can rely on saying that, okay, if we make 10 offers, like 9 people will accept them and 8 people will make them. So I think it's partly to do with that. It's just a kind of historical kind of thing that's always happened. But I think it's quite good because it means that you can kind of become more specifically focused on the course. But yeah, no one really knows why. Any other questions? Good. Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll go outside now. So if you just give me a minute, I'll pack up the laptop. Yeah. Yeah. And the step you normally sit in June not at the end, you sit the test after you apply. Yeah. Until and that's what most people do. Yeah, sometimes that will work actually. Yeah. You would have to check with their initial specifically. Yes, do you need to do stuff with the should I shut down on the okay, great. I'll say that you guys have the key. No, Hugh has it. Well, I don't have it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. How do I work? You guys, if you could just wait for me, please. Where are you going? I don't know where
Oh, fine. Okay, no. Did you hear it? Okay. Good. Right. Great. I haven't touched them, so they must be there. Brilliant. Okay. Did you tweet the link? Did you tweet the link?